I've always loved the quiet of libraries. The way the air seemed to hum with a subdued reverence. How the dusty scent of old books wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. I used to hang out at my grandma's house when she was still alive and kicking. The place was a bit dusty, though Nana did try her best at dusting, and the old wooden furniture made the air smell ancient, as it should. Surely, you know how the scent of your grandparents' house is, right? It was why I took the job at the city's oldest library. I grew up in that kind of rustic environment. I thought it would be the perfect place to escape, to lose myself in the endless stacks of long-forgotten stories. But I never imagined I would stumble upon one of my own. It started with a simple accident. I was restocking the history section when my foot caught on something. Looking down, I saw the corner of an old, leather-bound book peeking out from beneath a shelf. It was strange. This particular shelf was bolted to the floor, leaving no room for anything to slip underneath. Curious, I knelt and pulled the book free, the spine creaking with age. The title was embossed in gold, though the letters were faded and nearly illegible. It took a moment for me to decipher them. The Library of Echoes. I had never seen or heard of it before, which was odd given how well I knew the books that should be in this particular shelf. I turned it over, searching for a barcode or any sign. It belonged to our library. There was none. Someone might have accidentally put this back, I thought to myself. Thus, I reported this for our manager to look into via our library system. Finished filing out the report, my curiosity got the better of me. A book as old as it looked will definitely contain some sort of vintage novel that would intrigue a geeky bookworm such as me. I giddily took the book to the back room, where I could examine it without interruption. The pages were brittle, yellowed with age, but the text was clear, crisp even, as though the ink had just dried. As I read the first few lines, a strange sensation came over me. The words were familiar, unsettlingly so. The book described a librarian, alone in a vast, ancient library, discovering a hidden book that seemed to have been waiting for them. My hands began to tremble as I continued reading, realizing that the book was describing me, right down to the smallest details of my day. The chair I was sitting in, the coffee I had spilled earlier in the break room, even the way my heart was beginning to race as I read further. I should have stopped, but I couldn't. The story continued, recounting how the librarian, overwhelmed by the impossible nature of the book, would return to the shelves in search of more, how they would find a hidden door, one they had never noticed before, leading to a forgotten section of the library, a place that shouldn't exist. I shut the book. Well, that was weird. I thought to myself after a good yawn, the kind of yawn that shuts you out from the world for a few seconds. As I'm the only person in this library on a Sunday and had a filling lunch earlier, I decided to take a nap. I made sure to look like I was reading a book, a skill I developed in middle school. I remember falling asleep quickly. In the dream, I felt sudden terror as I saw myself in the middle of the same library. I don't remember standing up and walking away from my desk. Driven by a mix of fear and compulsion, I walked through the labyrinth of shelves until I saw it. The small, narrow door at the end of an aisle I knew had been empty, just waiting to be found as said in the book. The wood was ancient, the paint peeling, yet it called to me, pulling me forward with an irresistible force. I grasped the cold brass handle and pushed it open. The air beyond was different, colder, heavier, thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something I couldn't quite place. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long, shifting shadows across the walls. Shelves lined the room, filled with more books, each one seemingly older than the last. I picked up the first book that caught my eye. It was thick, bound in cracked leather, and as I opened it, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The words were in a language I couldn't understand, the letters twisting and contorting on the page as if they were alive. Then suddenly the book's cover became as hot as the sun. I screamed in pain as I dropped the book, my charred hands shaking uncontrollably. But it was too late. The door behind me slammed shut, the echo reverberating through the room like a gunshot. I was trapped. Panic set in, but my body refused to move, held in place by some unseen force. The books on the shelves began to hum, a low, guttural sound that resonated deep within my bones. I realized that the room itself was alive. The books were its organs, the shelves its bones, and I was its prey. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it rested another book, identical to the one I had first found. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me toward it as the humming grew louder, more insistent. I didn't want to open it, but my hands betrayed me, reaching out to touch the worn cover. The moment my fingers brushed the leather, the humming stopped. Silence fell over the room like a shroud. I opened the book. It was blank. I flipped through the pages, each one as empty as the last, until I reached the very end. There, in spidery handwriting, was a single sentence. "You are the last echo." I felt a sharp pain in my chest as if something had torn loose inside me. The room began to spin, the shadows closing in, pressing against me until I could barely breathe, and then as quickly as it had begun, it stopped. I was standing in the main hall of the library, the hidden door nowhere to be seen. The book was gone, vanished from my hands, but I wasn't alone. People were moving through the aisles, but they didn't see me. I tried to speak, to call out, but no sound came. It was as if I didn't exist. I rushed to the nearest patron, waving my hands in front of their face, but they walked right through me as if I were a ghost. In a way, I suppose I was. As I stood there, helpless, I heard it, the humming. It was faint at first, barely audible over the sounds of the library, but it grew louder, clearer, until I could make out the words, "You are the last echo." The truth hit me with a cold, sinking dread. I wasn't just in the library. I was part of it now, another echo in its endless, twisting holes. My story, my life had been absorbed, just like all the others who had come before me, and the library would continue to grow, to feed on the souls of those who wandered too far into its depths. I tried to leave, to escape, but no matter how far I ran, how many doors I opened, I always ended up back in that same room, with its flickering light and endless shelves. The books, now filled with my words, my thoughts, mocked me from their places on the shelves, and every time I opened one, I found the same sentence staring back at me. "You are the last echo." The moment I was about to read those exact words for the last time, a voice read it for me. It didn't sound human at all. It sounded like it was read in an infinitely large room, resonating every word. It was deafening. I felt my eardrums disintegrate. I could feel blood gush out of my ears down to my neck. This was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. Might even be the worst thing a human could feel before dying. I would never wish this excruciating pain upon no one. Before I could feel the thick crimson blood drip down my chest, I woke up. I woke up with a start. my heart racing as the oppressive darkness of the library faded away. I was still in the chair, surrounded by stacks of old dusty books, my drool pooling in one area of my desk, the late afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. I let out a shaky sigh, relieved that it had all just been a daydream, a twisted product of my overactive imagination. I glanced at the clock on the wall, noting that only a few minutes had passed since I had dozed off. I chuckled nervously at myself, rubbing my temples to dispel the lingering unease. The Library of Echoes wasn't real. It couldn't be. Just a product of my mind blending the musty atmosphere and this ancient building with the unsettling stories I'd been cataloging all day. But as I stood up to leave, something caught my eye. A book that I didn't remember pulling from the shelf sat open on the desk in front of me. The pages were filled with names, hundreds of them, written in an elegant, flowing script. I skimmed the list, my eyes widening as I saw the last name written at the bottom. It was mine. My breath hitched and I quickly slammed the book shut. My hands trembling, I forced a mocking laugh, trying to convince myself it was just another part of the dream that had bled into reality. Screw you, library. Screw you, I muttered as I laughed, trying to make light of the situation. But as I turned to leave the library, the shadows seemed to grow longer, the air colder, and I swear I heard faint whispers echoing through the aisles. You are the last echo. I hurried out, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the empty space. As I reached the door, I glanced back one last time. Everything seemed normal, just an old library filled with dusty books. But as I stopped outside into the fading daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that had followed me out of the dream and into the waking world. And when I looked at the windows, I could have sworn I saw a faint reflection of someone, or something, standing where I had just been.